And blessed to be a part of your day. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, with what's going on in Chicago and, of course, the president going back and forth with Spike Lee. What is the state of America, and where are we when it comes to being united? Can America, during Black History Month or the 11 other months of the year, cure this racial division? Joining us now is Professor Wilfred Reilly. Hate crime hoax, how the left is selling a fake race war. Professor Reilly, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Good
you guys are in Boise, right?
Yeah.
Well, hello to Robin Davis, if she happens to be listening. I spent some enjoyable time in Boise years back, really, when I was traveling the country. Great city.
Great city, one of the fastest growing in America, so we're happy to have you with us. So when
Glad to be here.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit, sir, about your thoughts initially about what's going on in Chicago, where you have the actor from the Empire show. All of a sudden, the media convicts these folks, and now it's a hoax. This is right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I am the author of the book Hate Crime Hoax that's actually coming out today. And what I find when I look at the collection of hate crime, essentially what I find in a sentence is that a great number of the very high-profile, widely reported hate crime stories discussed in the USA over really the past 3-4 years. So Jussie Smollett, I think you'd probably have to add Covington Catholic to that, where it was reported that this group of prep school athletes had abused a Native American Indian elder, threatened to take his sacred drum away, chanted build the wall. None of that actually happened. Yasmin Suweed, the young woman who claimed that Trump supporters attacked her on a train, ripped at her favorite hijab, threatened sexual assault. Eastern Michigan, the graffiti incidents, Air Force Academy, where a general came and spoke out against racism. The young black girl who claimed that boorish white men literally peed on her, Kean College with the death threats, Wisconsin Parkside, the noose incident, Hopewell Baptist, the burnt black church. If you go back and look at what occurred in those cases, all of them were fakes. About half of the 20 most widely reported quote-unquote hate crime cases in terms of, for example, Google search results in recent years have turned out to be fakes. So I became curious about why that was. I'm a research scientist by background, and I started writing the book. And you're absolutely right. Jussie Smollett appears to be another one of those incidents. I mean, the initial story was very questionable. I mean, he claimed that he was beaten at 2 o'clock in the morning by 2 white guys in downtown Chicago, which is an area that went about 90% for Hillary Clinton against Mr. Trump during the last election. For whatever reason, these guys had a full bottle of bleach with them. They had a rope noose with them. This is one of our bar districts in Chicago, so obviously that's what everyone carries around to the clubs with them. But they shouted, "This is MAGA country." For some reason, they recognized him from Empire, not necessarily the highest polling show among Trump supporters. He was beaten viciously for a couple of minutes, but he managed to get back to his building. He was still carrying his Subway sandwich. So there was some question, I think, initially for most people about whether that was an accurate story or narrative. And unsurprisingly, it turned out to be false. And that did happen in a timely fashion for me, if not for Mr. Smollett. I mean, the story was revealed to be a probable fake about a week before my book dropped. So I find that I've been discussing it a lot, but that's not a standalone case. That's one of a series of these incidents that turn out to be bluntly not real.
Sure. But what's the impact it has, as we're speaking to Professor Reilly here on KIDO Talk Radio, in his, I was going to say beloved Boise. I don't know if you beloved, but you do miss it.
Like it quite a lot. Great city.
What's the impact it has on the people that maybe they just want to believe what they see on Facebook or television? They don't have the critical thinking skills, as you just pointed out, sir, where, hey, the guy was beaten up, he did this, this, and this, and he still kept his Subway sandwich?
And yeah, I think that there were a large number of clues that case was going to collapse from the start. I mean, a couple of lawmen, Sheriff David Clark, who obviously leans right, but a good policeman. I think it was Sheriff Alex Azar, who's pretty apolitical. A couple of them pointed out that the moment they heard that there was a noose apparently involved in the case, they assumed that it was probably BS. And I have a legal background myself. I have a law degree from the University of Illinois. My own focus was prosecution. I thought pretty much the same thing. Violence is unfortunately frequent, but very rarely do people dress up in kind of the uniform for their team. So if you're in a fight with a white guy, he's probably not going to be wearing a Confederate flag shirt and a Trump hat and carrying a knotted rope with him and so on down the line. So that to me was the clue that this was nonsense. But I mean, when you ask what impact does this have, well, I don't think it necessarily has much impact at all on people that just want to believe. I was on Facebook and Twitter this morning, and friends of mine were teasing me about the book in the context of Jussie Smollett. Like, how can you believe Brother Jussie was lying? So I think if you want to believe something strongly enough, you'll probably continue to believe it. That's really the core idea of faith on a deeper level. But I do think most ordinary people are going to take a look at some of these widely reported racial incidents, might be a way to describe it, Barbecue Becky and Jussie Smollett and Covington Catholic, and think, what actually happened here? It's like the old line. I mean, there are three stories. There's my story, your story, and the truth. I think people are going to become less likely to accept your story as the truth. Now, what are the odds that a Caucasian sociology professor who's jogging through the park is really a wild racist who would attack any black person just for grilling, as versus she pointed out they were in the wrong section of the park and an argument between two urban people broke out? And I do think you'll see people moving toward assuming that number two might be the case. The worry, of course, is that, I mean, there are real victims of, crime between groups, sexual assault and so on. And you don't want to take away from their experience. But the more fake stories there are, the more that's probably going to happen. Crying wolf didn't help the boy in the end.
Professor Riley, one more time, if people want to get your book, what can they do, sir?
Well, I think they can go on Amazon essentially and buy it. It's that's Hate Crime Hoax. It actually releases today, so I'm glad you guys chose to have me on today. That drops today, but Hate Crime Hoax, the selling of a fake race war. And I hope people do get it. I mean, it's not right-wing ranting, and of course it's not left-wing ranting, as you could probably guess. It's a pretty empirical book. I mean, I have 409 of these hate crime incidents that just turned out to be fakes. I provide links to other sites. FakeHateCrimes.org is a great one. That's about 400 more. So people can judge for themselves how many of these racial incidents in our society are actually happening and how many of them seem to be figments of someone's imagination.
Fair enough, Dr. Riley. We'll have you back. Hopefully we can get you back to the Treasure Valley someday.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'm be more than glad to come on again, and I look forward to seeing the city at some point in the future.
All right. Good luck on your book. Congratulations.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Dr. Riley joining us. You can catch that Hate Crime Hoax at Amazon.com. KIDO Talk Radio time is 6:12. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. A couple things going on locally. According to the Idaho Press, there's a new bill to take away gun rights from people who sexually batter 16 and 17-year-olds, heading back to the House of Representatives. Also, the House looking at backing immunization exemptions. That passed 52 to 17. That is a big one. But back to this issue concerning gun rights and Marsy's Law. And I know Marsy's Law has passed the Senate. There's going to be, I believe it's tomorrow, the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance is going to have a big protest downtown protesting Marsy's Law. Now, we're going to have the folks on. I know Ray Amaya is working with the proponents of Marsy's Law, Representative Crane, Senator Lakey, and others. It did pass the Senate, and what the proponents say the bill is, it's designed to give victims the rights. So let's say you're a victim of a crime, you have some thug, some malcontent, some convicted criminal, he's going to get paroled, they notify you, you can come in and say, this person is a very, very bad person, he should not get out. It gives victims special rights, that's what the critics say. And also, the idea of red flag laws. And red flag laws, that, like they have in Oregon, means that we'll use Kevin Miller as an example. Kevin Miller doesn't socialize a lot. I have a lot of wonderful, beautiful, warm, intelligent people in my neighborhood. And I'm sure you do as well. And maybe you're like Mrs. Miller. You go out and socialize and talk a little bit about the spring and what you're going to do in the summer and maybe going to McCall, that sort of thing. I just kind of go in and back and forth. Well, some people could misconstrue that behavior as, well, Kevin Miller's antisocial. Kevin Miller doesn't have the lights on in his house. Kevin Miller sits back and kind of does his own thing, right? Well, I think that we need to call the authorities on Kevin Miller. And if Kevin Miller has any weapons in his house because of this welfare check, because other people are concerned about Kevin Miller, they can take your guns. What is it designed to do? To prevent mass shootings. Like in Oregon, you had a kid who said something at school. They went to the kid's home and took the daddy's guns. Does that seem like America to you? At 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Does that seem like America to you? Now you have the new Attorney General, William Barr, saying it's America to him because he approves of red flag laws. Why? I saw a Senate confirmation hearing when he said red flag laws, he's in favor of those. How can you be someone who loves the Second Amendment and be in favor of the red flag laws? Number one. Number two, Marsy's Law. We've had a lot of people lobbying this program, pro and con, saying that this is a way to, again, the back door to get your guns. For me, having interviewed Fred Goldman, having covered crime for many, many years, actually going to court, not just reading the papers, but covering crime, and interviewing people that have been convicted, interviewing people that have been falsely accused and acquitted, and doing the crime beat and doing it on international television, I tend to look at things a little differently when you're talking about victims. So we have Marsy's Law, we have that, and we also have Canyon County deciding you don't really need to be English only. Those stories coming up. But first, for entertainment purposes only, this is something that we didn't get to yesterday, but it is blowing up the online world, and this is Dianne Feinstein. You remember her, senator from California? Well, she had some kids coming to the office. And you remember W.C. Fields? Maybe you didn't. You can Google him. He was a world-famous comedian about 100 years ago. And W.C. Fields said, you don't work with kids and you don't work with parents. So the challenge of the new Green Deal has been talked about again and again and again. Now you've got kids coming up to people and saying, are you in favor of the new Green Deal, which would bankrupt the country, would bankrupt any country, including China? So these kids have a little field trip. And on their field trip, they decide, hey, we're going to go see our senator. And those of you that have moved here from California, you know Dianne Feinstein. You're happy that you have Senator Risch now and you have Senator Crapo. But they said, we're going to go on a field trip and talk to Dianne Feinstein. So I want you to take a look and a listen to this, and we'll get your thoughts in a minute here.
We're going to go in and share this letter, and we're going to do it all together. Yeah. Share it in front of Feinstein. We're asking her to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Please.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal.
Some scientists have said that we have 12 years to turn this around.
Well, it's not going to get turned around in 10 years. What we can do,
Senator, if
is
this
put
doesn't get turned around in 10 years, you're looking at the faces of the people who are going to be living with these consequences.
Okay, cut that for a minute. By the way, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio, Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. You have Dianne Feinstein, who all of a sudden gets bushwhacked. You have these little kids that have been indoctrinated. See, this is why it's important that we meet each and every day. Because not only do we have to go up against the old libs, now we've got to go up against the new libs who are sitting there brainwashing these kids that the new Green Deal is, in fact, going to happen. Otherwise, the world ends in 10 years. What? I mean, most of us grew up in the Cold War. And if you're a millennial, maybe you didn't. You grew up in peace, love, and understanding. Great. But to all of a sudden start scaring these little kids, hey, little kid, if we don't hug a tree, the world's going to end in 10 years. You know, kids should be able to grow up and have a good time. Kids should be worried about playing not video games, going outside and throwing the ball and doing sorts of things with their parents. Maybe going to the trampoline park, right? Not sitting back here and worrying about the new Green Deal. It gets better.
And it's supposed to be for the people and by the people and all
you know
for the
what's
people.
interesting about this group is I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing. You come in here and you say it has to be my way or the highway. I don't respond to that. I've gotten elected. I just ran. I was elected by almost 1 million vote plurality.
And there you have it. I don't have to listen to you. Hey, little kids, you're not the boss of me. And it gets even better. If you haven't heard this, it gets really better. You have to stay with us, and we'll get your comments on this. And maybe you agree with that, Feinstein. I kind of like how she handled this. but you have these militant folks using children to promote their green agenda. So we've got Dianne Feinstein. We've got Marsy's Law. We've got a lot to roll here today at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And really, here we have Marsy's Law, where victims are supposed to get these rights. I'm in favor of that. But when it comes to gun rights, why do we have our legislature always looking to take away our right to keep and bear arms? This new proposal that we discussed, if you're just tuning in, which would be a bill which would take away the gun rights for people who sexually batter 16 and 17-year-olds, heads to the House. Are you in favor of that? A lot going on today. Thank you for waking up on the right side. Our time on KIDO Talk Radio is 6:20. You're listening to Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And taking your calls about the issues that matter to you. Thank you, Dave Ramsey. Don't forget Glenn Beck in between Kevin Miller and Dave Ramsey right here on KIDO Talk Radio. If you missed the Ada County Lincoln Day Association, the 108th such association honoring Abraham Lincoln, Doris Kearns Goodwin in town, Pulitzer Prize winner. Photos available right now, online, anytime on KIDOTalkRadio.com. Taking your phone calls about a plethora of topics, and we'll get to more of Dianne Feinstein plays with the kids in a minute. First, David in Napa joins us now. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, David.
Yes, good morning, Kevin. I think you and I are about the same age, which means we were both born the year the world ended.
Yes, you're right, yeah.
Because Ed Begley Jr. and about 3,000 or 4,000 other hippies went up to Colorado, and, when the west half of America didn't slough off, they, had to come down and get jobs, I guess. But then a few years was this a national ad? I remember this little towhead boy. He was way up high. You could tell. You couldn't see where he was. And he says, not only these grown-ups are spending fuel, there might be any left by the time I get to college. And he's, about 8 years old. So you figure by 1986, we're not going to have any fuel. Then a few years later, Julian Simons, who's a bit of a socialist, okay, he made a bet with Paul Ehrlich, whom I call Nostradamus, who has made such things like there'd be food rationing, water rationing, and food riots in the United States by 1979, that England wouldn't exist by 2000. I mean, he's one of the Teflon prophets Thomas Sowell talked about. You pick the resources, and in 10 years, they will be more plentiful and cheaper, and they bet a steak dinner. He did. He lost across the board, and he reneged on his dinner. Then it started 10 years to save the earth. Remember that in the 80s, and we went from global cooling to global warming. And to scare kids with doom porn. I think of all the legitimate nuclear nightmares that I had as a child.
Exactly, right.
And they know it's caca. That's the thing. They say, look, we have to scare people, and we get them as kids, and then we'll get them because green is the new red. And it would have been a great argument against the Democrats 20 years ago to say, look at the unbroken careers of Bill Clinton or Ted Kennedy, who, killed a chick in a pond, tried to gang rape a waitress, and ran out when one of his relatives got into a mess in Palm Beach. Now, I don't think anything happened there, but he did. That would have been a great argument in 1999. Okay, AOC was born after the wall fell. She doesn't know how bad communism is, and the left isn't going away. They just pile on this. And it's a political grab. It's more serious than it sounds, so because they don't remember, and everybody's memory is as old as you are. And that kind of phases us into this gun thing.
Right.
Which is, they wanted a few years ago, anybody on the no-fly list. Well, speaking of Ted Kennedy, he was on the no-fly list. The no-drive list, I can understand. So basically, some star chamber puts you on a list and says, you can't be on it, you can't get off it, you can't know how you were put on it. Okay, you think the same people who gave us Lois Lerner, you think the same people who gave us the lawfare that the Democrats can draw, you think they might, if they don't like somebody, stick their name on that list and now it's on forever? And this, okay, I don't like pervs, like, Bill Clinton.
Right.
Although Gloria Steinem says that basically what he did to Kathleen Willey and Paula Jones and whatever was just a really rude handshake. New York Times, by the way.
Well, and now, it's funny. Now you have the young millennial libs. I saw this on Meet the Press, David, where they're saying, well, you have to impeach Donald Trump because really that's why you impeached Bill Clinton. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I was around, and it's funny, the older we get, the more we sound like the old codgers. I was around, I covered, you know, Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton and Michael Isikoff and all those things. Very different time. Doesn't excuse anybody's behavior, but I love how all of a sudden the young folks that are everywhere, and I was trying to think who we were talking to about that recently, where, you know, if you're young, you know everything, and we put you on TV because we're pandering to that millennial cohort.
Yeah, it's kind of a demographic thing because I don't look. Everything Bill Clinton did, he did in public. And by the way, Stormy Daniels, you know, the Empire State Building turned pink, and not 1 minute of coverage. I saw it turn purple for the Westminster Dog Show, and they showed it on TV, but they won't say why it turned pink. How much coverage did they say that Stormy Daniels had to pay $280,000? Not only did she not win, they said her lawsuit was frivolous. But okay, let's get into this sexual thing. Okay, a guy is handsy. Okay, Joe Biden is handsy. And he's gonna lose his gun rights. Okay, handsy does not mean shoot up a school. Handsy means you slap him in the face or knee him in the nards and you move on.
All right, David, thank you for the call. KIDO Talk Radio Time, 628, 107.5 FM, 580 AM with Kevin Miller in the morning. Let's get you to work safely and on time. It's a little sunny out, so we appreciate that from our friends at Channel 7, taking your calls, joining the conversation. That's what it's all about here at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. So we have Dianne Feinstein going toe-to-toe with these little kids. And if you were just waking up, we've got David and I talking about this bill, that if you are convicted or accused of sexually harassing or assaulting someone, you should lose your gun rights. Coming up, one county in the state of Idaho has rescinded its English-only requirements. And really that's what comes down to what type of country we are. Are we a multilingual country? Certainly we're a multicultural country, but the idea of getting rid of English as the official language of the county, we'll tell you a little bit about that. But here's more of Dianne Speaks with the Kids.
And I know what I'm doing. So, you know, maybe people should listen a little bit.
I hear what you're saying, but we're the people who voted you. You're supposed to listen to us. That's your
How old are you?
job.
How old
I'm
are you?
16. I
Well,
can't
you didn't vote for me.
Well,
I'm 24.
It doesn't matter. We're the ones who's going to be
Doing
impacted.
something.
It doesn't matter. We're going to be the ones who are impacted.
I understand that. I have 7 grandchildren. I understand it very well.
Senator, the cost of
And-
not taking this action is far higher than the cost of what the Green New Deal will be. And there
Here's
is
what-
enormous popularity for this bill around the
Okay.
whole country.
Here's
And we're
what
asking you to
we
be
are
brave and
proposing.
do this for us and for your grandchildren.
Get enough for everyone. I'm trying to do the best I can, which was to write a responsible resolution.
Any plan that doesn't
has-
take bold,
Okay.
transformative action is not going to be what we need.
Well, you know better than I do. So I think one day you should run for the Senate.
Great. I
And
will.
then you do it your way.
But by that time,
In the meantime,
there's
I just won a big election.
I got to admit that is pretty good. But even the crazy, devious little libs can't deal with the even crazier, devious, younger little libs. Look, the Green New Deal, you can't pay for it. And I go back to what my dad used to say about me and some people that are critical of this show. Kevin, if you had a brain, you'd be dangerous. But just because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says that the world's going to end in 12 years, think about this. The perception that's going on right now in the world that we live in. Thank God we live in Idaho. Thank goodness we live in the Treasure Valley. We're immune from the craziness. It's just Republican on Republican infighting that we have here. They just wouldn't listen to her, and she's one of the most, established senators in the country. Oh, it's going to be a good one this primary season. You're listening to Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Talk Radio, your home for Fox News. And did you know that KIDO Talk Radio is your home, your official home for Fox News on the radio here in the Treasure Valley on 107.5 FM, 580 AM? Coming up, we're going to speak with Representative Kristi Zitto. She's calling in. Pete from Mountain Home, please stand by. But first, we go live to Capitol Hill. Rachel Sutherland joining us, Fox News Radio's Capitol Hill Congressional. Trying to think of anything else, any other credentials I could give you right now. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning, Kevin. I don't know. You know what I am? I'm just kind of like a first responder of news.
I was going to say, well, hopefully we won't have an emergency during this time, but the president's away and the national emergency seems to be in play.
Right, because the House today is set to vote on a resolution that's intended to overturn this national emergency on the southern border. It has no real chance of succeeding. I think largely this is a symbolic move on the part of Democrats. They want to go on the record of saying, hey, we don't like this. We don't like the national emergency. We don't like the fact that the president's going to be moving money around without the say of Congress. That really is a congressional issue, a constitutional question that will have to be answered by the courts. Now, there are a handful of Republicans that could side with Democrats on this thing and then therefore, sending it on over to the White House. But if that happens, the president's going to veto it, and then we're not sure if there could be a 2/3 majority to be able to override the veto. I think it's a long stretch. I think that ultimately this issue of the emergency declaration on the southern border will be decided by the courts.
Indeed, of course, the president kind of predicted that along with a lot of other things. National security, though, is an issue, whether it's the national emergency or the president meeting with the leader of North Korea. Anybody in Congress monitoring this? I'm sure they are, but are they just focused on their legislative duties? Does this impact, funding of foreign policy of the military at all?
It could. I mean, there are some projects. Part of the money that the president is seeking, Kevin, is already appropriated funds for military construction projects. So I had seen a list. There are some in Florida that could be impacted. I want to say Iowa, but don't quote me on that. There are some construction projects that could be scrapped as a result of this move. So you could see some representatives or senators who come from those areas crying foul because they're going to be hearing from their constituency, right? I think ultimately, though, the pressure is not going to be really on lawmakers in this regard because it's out of their hands. This is going to, again, I don't know if the Supreme Court will fast track it. That's a rare thing, but it could happen that they could fast track it and we could hear sooner rather than later. Otherwise, it's going to be a huge 2020 campaign issue.
It's funny. You look at this week's Time magazine for those people that look to get the print edition and not the digital one, and it's the president and all the contenders that are already declared, and that's maybe almost half the field. So we could have almost 20 people contending for the...
Yeah. Remember 2016, and we had to have, the kids' table at the debates?
Right.
I mean, this is going to be a huge Democratic primary, and I think that the challenge here for all of these contestants, if you want to call them that, is going to be separating themselves from the other. There's a lot of progressives in that field, and they all kind of stand for the same thing. So you begin to wonder, okay, where is the choice for folks who are maybe feeling a little politically homeless at this point? I mean, you've got the far right and some people who aren't really big fans of President Trump, and then you've got the far left and the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes of the world, and you don't have really anybody in the middle that can really appeal to middle America. I think Joe Biden would be great as that kind of candidate, but who knows if he'll get in.
Rachel, we do know that you're going to be there for us. We so appreciate you.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Rachel Sutherland, joining us. Let's go to Representative Kristi Zitto joining us now. Good morning, sir or ma'am. How are you?
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
And there I go. I show my age every time I get that title. I have that stereotypical thing, but thank you for joining us here this morning. I was looking at the Idaho Press Tribune this morning, and there's a bill, and they have you kind of associated with it, and we'd love to get your thoughts on it. This idea of gun rights involving folks that who sexually batter 16 and 17-year-olds, that heads to the House. Can you give us the skinny on that? Because the headline really doesn't do the story justice.
Okay, I haven't read the press yet this morning. I haven't got to my office. I would have been there, but I decided to call you. You're referring to House Bill 70, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. It sounds good on the surface, and that's the challenge with a lot of the stuff that we see is it sounds good. It makes us feel good, like we're doing something to help someone. But what this will do is, let's say, for instance, you got a 17-year-old who's a freshman in college, and they date a 21-year-old, and then for whatever reason it goes south and there's a report made. Well, now this 21-year-old could be convicted of sexual battery, and they could lose their gun rights. I shouldn't say he, because it can go both ways. And they could lose their gun rights and even end up on a sex offenders list for the rest of their life, simply because they dated a 17-year-old and then for whatever reason it went south. Another example that I heard just recently was of a guy who went into a bar, met a woman there. She obviously had been ID'd, got into the bar. She was drinking, partying with these people. He went home with her. Comes to find out, she's not of legal age. She had fake ID. She was 15 years old. He ended up being convicted of sexual battery on a minor and now ended up doing time in prison. He'll be on the sex offenders list and he won't have his gun rights for the rest of his life. He, in good faith, believed that because she was there and because she had her ID. So, and I'm not saying bad things don't happen, Kevin, because they do. They do. But at the same time, we have to be so careful not to penalize and ruin the lives of people who are caught up in stuff like this. Just like you say, innocent until proven guilty. Well, he was guilty, but she was there with ID representing herself as something that she wasn't.
Sure.
And, you know, these are the things we have to avoid. These are the things we have to be careful of. And, you know, we're seeing this. We're seeing these back doors into infringements on this idea of innocence until proven guilty, these back doors into doing away with our due process. And that is a basic tenet of freedom in this country, is due process. And so on that House bill yesterday, when it passed out of committee, Representative Scott, Representative Dollinger, and I were the only dissenting votes to get that to the floor.
Right, so that moves to the House, and we were talking a little bit about it. I'm glad you called in this morning. Hey, another bill, and I hate to play I know you've called in about Dianne Feinstein, and we'll get to her in a second, but it's fascinating that, every year you have these kind of crazy bills, but I believe it hasn't been voted on. I think it's undergoing its second reading, if I believe the website correctly, that would establish the age of marriage in Idaho at 16. Currently, there is no official state of legally when you can get married. I don't know if you have been following that bill at all.
Well, I have, because I was the only dissenting vote for that to go to the floor. Do I believe that 14-year-olds should get married? No. In best case, no, I do not. But what this would do is it would make it illegal. It would make it so that in the state of Idaho, under that age floor, you legally could not get married, even with parental consent.
Sure.
Even with a court order. So my issue with this is, and I definitely, again, I will reiterate time and time again, I do not believe that best case 14-year-olds should get married, even though my grandmother was, and my grandpa was 21, and theirs was, it was the perfect marriage. I mean, they said he loved her. You didn't ever say or do anything bad about my grandma because they were best friends and they worked together and they raised a family. But that being said, my issue with this is I see it, number one, as an erosion of family value, because we're saying even if there is possibly a pregnancy involved and a child involved, you cannot try to build a family if you're not of a certain age. So I see that as an erosion of that family value. And then I see it as an invasion in parental rights. And again, you know, we backdoor into these things that the state knows better for your family than you do. But at the same time, Kevin, we've got some good things.
Sure.
We've got like the bill that for vaccination exemption notification passed through the House. And whether you're in favor of vaccinations or not, you need to know that you have that option.
Well,
that's just transparency.
And back to the marriage thing, they'll probably vote on that this week, you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, quickly now, because, again, we so appreciate you listening. Representative Christy Zito joining us, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Your thoughts on Dianne Feinstein meeting the kids. We aired that earlier. We'll air it again, where they're just pretty much, I mean, have you ever had an experience like that at the State House where the kids say, we're your boss?
No, I haven't. I think it's very, very, very unfortunate that children live in a world today, and our young adults, where they fear that in 10 years, when they're 11 or 12 years old, there won't even be a reason for them to exist. That our world will be ended. I think it's unfortunate that instead of learning about the rich resources of our country and of our world, the rich resources of the people who live here, all of this time is spent to instill fear in these children, to give them no hope for the future. And Kevin, to me, that's the greatest form of child abuse, because when you don't feel that you have a future, when you don't feel that there's anything for you when you grow up, what have you got?
Very good point. Very good point. Representative Zinno, keep doing the people's work. We appreciate you, and we need to have you in studio sometime. I know you're very busy, but one day when maybe you have a half day there or something.
I would love to, Kevin. And 4 or 5 times this week, I've had people come to me and say, you should be on Kevin Miller at least once a week to let us know what goes on. So
I agree.
Maybe we can set something like that up. Kevin, I appreciate you. I appreciate the platform that you offer the citizens to be able to, banter these ideas and find out what's going on in our world and in our state house. And thank you for all you do.
Thank you, ma'am. We'll work on that weekly update. Take care now.
All right. Have a beautiful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Pete from Mountain Home joins us on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, sir.
Well, I was pleased to hear our representative from the Mountain Home Elmore County area on, and we are real proud of her and glad we put her in there.
Sure.
And I just wanted to comment on this whole fake hate crime and Spike Lee's lecture to the Oscar people about where we want in 2020 we want to go to a world of love and not hate. And I'm looking over the first 2 years of President Trump's term and the level of hatred that has been spewed from the left, the level of physical violence that has come out of them, attacking members of his cabinet in restaurants, the Antifa punks beating people up. If you want to move to love instead of hate, you sure as heck don't want to move to the left, because that's where all the hate's coming from.
Well, we see that all the time. I mean, elect me, I'm a lib, I'm against everything, and the world's going to end. That's a great positive platform.
Oh, yeah. And you look at the violence and the amount of hatred on TV that is being just spewed from the left wing in this country. I don't know where they think they're going to come up with love. They're encouraging violence and hatred against all of us, and it's hypocritical and it's sickening.
You're right. How did you like those little kids? I mean,
that was, I have to say there's a certain amount of schadenfreude involved listening to them lecturing Dianne Feinstein.
Whatever happened to I'd like to buy the world of Coke?
Yeah. It just, they are really beautiful, beautiful examples of the propaganda machine that the public schools, especially in California, have apparently turned into.
Well, thank goodness we're not in California. Hold on, and for people that are just tuning in to KIDO Talk Radio.
We're standing we're asking for the new Green Deal.
And we're trying to present this letter that we've made to Senator Feinstein.
We are trying to ask you to vote yes on the Green New Deal.
Please.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We have our own Green New Deal piece of legislation.
Well, we're trying to promote the Green New Deal.
Well, there are reasons why I can't, because there's no way to pay for it.
There we have it. They weren't really listening to her.
No, they have their talking points, and that's all they cared about. And something else that's interesting is they're talking about, well, we have to do something about the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That's what's doing it. There is a volcano just off the coast of Iceland that's been spewing carbon dioxide for the last 4 or 5 years. It's building a new island there. There is more carbon dioxide coming out of that in 4 years than the entire human race has produced since we've been on the planet. And so they're going to have to plug all the volcanoes. There's like 200 or 300 volcanoes all over the world doing that all the time. And I want to know what the Green New Deal is going to do to stop those volcanoes.
Pete, I got to run. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
All right, more coming up. Liberty Linda will join us. You're listening to Kevin Miller on 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Your home for Hannity, KIDO Talk Radio.